Hello everybody, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion here tonight, and now that we have everybody set up on the three different SharePoint implementations, we are now going to look at our textbook, and I want you to notice this cover here. It does focus on SharePoint 2016. Um, so if you have either an electronic version of the book or a hard copy, you might want to pull it out and have it next to you as we work. Um, I do like working with the ebooks often, but one thing you'll notice here with this ebook is it is from a Kindle version, and as a result, sometimes some of the images and the way the layouts are in the printed book don't really transfer to the ebook version. Yet all the critical content is there. So I was just telling the people here in class that when you get a book like this, an IT book, and one thing you want to do is not skip past the introduction section of the book, because sometimes there's some really critical information in there for working with the technologies that you need to make everything work if you're trying to follow along. So let's go ahead and just jump to the introduction then. I'm going to start to step through this so you guys are kind of like, kind of keyed in to the type of thing that we're going to be doing here. So they notice that it says who this book is for, and it says this is designed for beginning and intermediate level users who are either looking at using SharePoint Server 2016, that's what's loaded on your VMs, remember that, or SharePoint Online. And notice we do have that implementation that we just connected up through Office 365 here at Gateway. And then notice what it says here. You want to use either one of these SharePoint implementations to create, modify, share, manage sites, web pages, documents, and other content and capabilities, find people and information, collaborate with others. So that's part of it, so learning how to do those things. Do you notice that really one thing that is not included here is application development? Right? And this is a key thing that we talked about. A lot of times when you do learn how to do application development, you're going to like advanced level or pro level books, and then often I'm always really pensive with those books because I've discovered from working with them that sometimes the stuff doesn't work. Just because it's in a book doesn't necessarily mean the code works, so you always got to take that with a grain of salt. All right, so this is both kind of an introduction to the environment of SharePoint, and then also showing you how to use it at the same time. Believe it or not, just even having used SharePoint a little bit makes you more qualified as a SharePoint person than most of the people that are actually using it, because they really, a lot of people don't learn what they're doing in there, and they think of SharePoint as just a way to share files, and that's not really the case. SharePoint, keep this in your head, is a platform for many, many different things. They kind of step through here and they talk about some of the things that you're going to be learning. And our focus, frankly, is going to be on the earlier parts of the book. I'm not sure how far we're going to get. When I taught this in the summer, and it was the first time teaching with this book, I think we managed to get up to chapter 8 or 9. I think we got through chapter 9 as far as activities. Some of the other things that come after that, when you look at chapters 10 and 13, those are things that we're going to talk about in the second course and go into basically more deeper level components, although we will review some things in there as well. All right, the author lets us know here that this book does have resources, and if you do follow that link, you can access those practice files. So sometimes the practice files, frankly, are just really simple little things. For example, Word documents, or maybe little what we call web part files. So like portions of web pages or portions of websites that you can import and reuse. Basically like little templates or reusable components. If you go to our resources page in the course shell, which I encourage you to do, and of course I'm not finding, second screen, of course. On the resources page, Notice that I do have the links, the same ones that are talked about in the introduction, so you can get to the downloads and the errata, but I kind of saved you a step here, folks, and I put the downloads right on this posting, so you don't even have to go to the website to get them. So just be aware of that. If you ever run into any issues with the stuff that the book is asking you to do, don't forget to come here and check the errata link to see if maybe there's a typo in the book, so like something's being typed wrong or you got the wrong file or whatever it is. So always be aware of that. All right, switching back over to the PDF here. There's a little breakdown of what we're going to cover in each one of these chapters. So with chapter 1, which I'm going to lecture through in just a little bit here, it really just talks about what SharePoint is and how it works and what the platform is. It also will kind of point you to a couple of resources that will show you that SharePoint, because it is such a complicated product, and if you think of like Visual Studio, for example, you guys know there's different versions of Visual Studio, and on top of it all, Visual Studio has all these different components you can add or remove, or third-party tools you can add. And SharePoint has a lot of the same kind of complexity. And unfortunately, there's not like one unified version of it. And then for every version, there's like maybe 10 different flavors. And all those different flavors have different capabilities and limitations. And what the book tries to tell you in chapter 1 is what it takes, basically, to make certain things work, and what you might not be able to do at all in the implementation that you have access to. All right, so breakdown of all the chapters and then all the files that are associated with all the activities in those chapters. So you can see a lot of, real simple little things. All right. The other thing that we are looking at here too is SharePoint and having basically two major versions we're looking at in this book. The one is SharePoint Server 2016, and then the online subscription plan as well. And notice for each of those, they have 2 tiers of service. So they have the standard version with the CAL. So let's talk about what a CAL is. It's a client access license. So what that means is how many people in the organization or how many accounts you can create for the machine. And this is the way that Microsoft makes money. So for example, if you have an organization that maybe has, and I'm not even sure what the number is these days, let's say 20 people, you might not need to purchase any client access licenses for your implementation. However, if you have 10,000 people, you might find that you have to purchase licenses for most of them. And folks, that's how Microsoft makes their money. They sell you the product for cheap or free, and then of course you want to actually use it, and then you pay for being able to access it. Now the online subscriptions, of course, are predicated upon the fact that it's running out in the cloud somewhere. You don't have to admin it really like you would a standard on-premise installation. And apparently they have 2 different tiers, so they have Plan 1 and Plan 2. And I'm going to assume that those mimic standard and enterprise. The version that we have loaded on our SharePoint server VMs is the enterprise version. That's also true on sharepoint.gtc.edu. And I have to make the assumption that they're using Plan 2 or their higher level plan for the Office 365 install. So I can't say that with 100% certainty. However, that's most likely the case. See here, they're trying to sell you on the ebook a little bit, and honestly, if you're okay with reading on screen, it really is a much more affordable way to get books. You can do it on tablets, computers, phones, whatever. And I know this is available as a Kindle version, and which is how this document here was actually generated. Once again, they have information about the errata and links, and that's really about it for the introduction. Okay, so now we're going to jump into chapter 1. Yay! All right, so finally into the meat of the material here. And they begin by telling us, notice right at the top, that we don't need any practice files for this. You don't have to download anything and have anything available. This is basically, for the most part, just reading and information gathering. All right. Now, if you read this little section here, and I find it interesting, SharePoint, you know, very often, you know, like when people talk about it, they're like, what the heck is SharePoint, right? And some of you maybe already work with it. And for the most part, people think of it as a file sharing platform, but we know it's so much more. It's a web content management system, very sophisticated one. It's one that allows for high-level interactivity and sharing certain types of documents and resources. It is something that can be used to do project planning, task tracking, you know, wikis, interactive content, social networking, messaging. Can even handle other higher level features if needed. And the interesting thing is that you notice right here in this paragraph, it says you can decide which version is best for you. And for most people, that tends to be the enterprise version. And then whether or not you want to run it out on the cloud, or if you really want to run it in your local organization. And with SharePoint 2016, Microsoft really made a notable change in how they pushed the product, where they really do not want us to load it on-premise if possible. And you know, if you think about it, that's kind of a logical thing. So a lot of us here at Gateway work with the Google Apps suite, right? So Google Docs and Gmail and YouTube and all the different stuff that comes with Google. And we just assume it's all in the cloud and it just works and it works great. And one of the reasons Gateway uses it for both the faculty and staff and students. With SharePoint, though, they realize that the Microsoft paradigm has always been on-premise installs for both their servers and for all the server software that sits on top. And now they're really pushing their cloud platform, which of course is called Azure. And one of the things that Azure does really well is run Windows Server and SharePoint Server. So they really prefers that you do it that way. And there's a lot of advantages to it, especially from an administrative standpoint. Server admins don't want to hear it, but you know, their jobs are kind of at risk really these days because of that paradigm shift that's happening. All right, as we get rolling here, they give you more and more descriptions about the things you can do, and I can let you read this for yourself. But the whole concept here of SharePoint being basically a huge environment in which we can collaborate in many, many different ways. The interesting thing about it is there's so much to learn. There's certainly, you're not going to pick up all the stuff you need to know about SharePoint from the 2 courses you're going to take here at Gateway. But we hope that at least you get enough familiarity to be able to go out into the field, work with it, and get that professional expertise that you need. I've had a number of students that were in our grant-funded program, which taught SharePoint, that just from the 2 simple courses we had in SharePoint, were able to get jobs working with SharePoint. A number of them were working directly with it. Some of them did it by choice. Some of them, you know, after learning the environment, opted out, right, because they see like the complexities of it. But there is employment possibilities here. Lots of organizations have SharePoint implementations, don't know how to use them, and look for people that know how to, you know, help us use this somehow. You know, literally that type of mindset. The preferred thing, of course, is that you run this in the cloud, and in this paragraph here they talk about that. And really, in the past, the mindset always was you install your software. You see with Office 365 now that we're not completely away from that, but a lot of organizations are preferring to run, like if you just do basic documents, do you really need to install that software on your computer? Why bother, right? It makes a lot of sense. Right. You see a bunch of other services here. So SharePoint Online is part of Office 365, which we saw in the previous video. It also includes Microsoft Exchange. So if you do an online hosted version, you get email services that go with it. Not just any email services, but really what a lot of people consider the best email service, which is Microsoft Exchange. And even though I use all the Google stuff here at Gateway, I do kind of miss Microsoft Outlook in working with the Microsoft products. I think their email is genuinely better than the Google email. Notice that also Skype for Business, so, kind of like the online meeting rooms we use in the classroom often, that tool is also attached through the online environment. So really what you're seeing from Google here, and I hope you're seeing the parallel, is how they're kind of copying what Google has done, right? To give you all these really powerful services all online, all hosted. You don't have to manage it. You just, sign up, create an account, pay your fee, and, if you work for some sort of big company, they're paying it for you. So I think that's definitely the way it's going to go, and I would envision a time, probably not too far in the future, where on-premise installs will be completely not allowed, and I don't think that's too far away. In fact, I would predict that maybe even within 5 years that might happen. All right, this section of the chapter talks about how there are instances where people create what we call kind of like a hybridized environment. So a hybrid of both having on-premise services and cloud-hosted services. So for example, an organization might opt to, let's say, run their Microsoft Exchange email server on site. Because why? Because they already have it and it's working. And some might opt to run some of the applications that are bundled with SharePoint from their machines. And then they allow for a mix with 2016. But I really don't think that Microsoft prefers that you do it that way. And I've seen from firsthand experience that there can be some significant configuration issues if you're not well trained. So it's not really a task for somebody that is just learning SharePoint, for example, to try to configure an environment like that. Now, we're not actually hitting the SharePoint server right now to bring up a screen like what we see here, but what they're showing us is an example of how when you do log into SharePoint, that you might land on a page that looks somewhat like this. And as we were goofing around a little bit earlier tonight, setting up accounts and trying all the different ways to connect, I think we all were able to get to the point where we were inside of SharePoint and getting a screen that's similar to this or exactly like this. This, of course, is the 2016 look. I always found it strange with SharePoint when I looked at how these default pages look. It's like, oh my God, why would you do this? That was always my thought. But then, as you learn what the environment does, it's not like something that's designed to just regurgitate information to you. It's designed for you to create things within it, regardless of your user level, whether it's like a really simple page or add contents or documents or whatever the case is. There's some things that you'll notice in the interface, and keep in mind that the 3 different implementations we're going to work with will have slightly different spots for some things, and they might look a little bit different, but usually all the tools are the same. And you'll see this kind of multi-layered navigation approach that they use. So for example, you will have menu items on the top left that will relate directly to the content that's on the SharePoint page you're visiting right now, or site, or wiki, or blog, or whatever it is. And then up in the top right, you have tools that relate to working with that content from more of an outsider standpoint, or the ability to actually get in there and start to edit some of the content. If you are the owner of a SharePoint page or site or whatever the case is, or are a person that's been given rights to do edits, you'll see little edit options all over the place where people that don't have those permissions won't see those. So you can see that a lot of the stuff that is present on the screen, you're going to have the capability to change and move around. And I think that's really pretty cool. Now, they do have names for some of the things inside here. And, I always like to kind of make sure that you get the lingo. So you don't want to go to like a SharePoint conference or somebody and have somebody say quick launch and you have no idea what they're talking about. But when they talk about the quick launch bar here, they're really looking at the navigation that is created. So you can actually customize the navigation to suit your needs on an individual user level within SharePoint, which is kind of cool. So if like there's certain stuff that you always do, you can opt to take and link that up to your quick launch area. And if you're wondering, it's the left side navigation that they call the quick launch. There's also what they call the top navigation area. That's what they call it, see, top navigation area. Or sometimes you hear it referred to as the link bar at the top, so just know that. Notice this little blurb. And there's a lot of these little blurbs in the book. And they'll warn you. They'll say sometimes that you'll see stuff and it might look just like what you see in the book. And sometimes you might see stuff that looks completely different because what the SharePoint version you might be working with might not have given you the access rights to do all the stuff that's in the book. So maybe you have a SharePoint account, but you have no permissions to edit any content on any page. All you can really kind of do is poke around and maybe open a document. And a lot of implementations are like that. Fortunately, we have the ability, at least in our two local on-premise solutions, both the VM and the actual, to control a little bit more than most users will be able to do. All right, we're getting to the point now where we have activity to try, and then I should explain that the way that this book is structured. When I will give you assignments from the book, here's what I expect from you: that you will either come to class and sit in while we perform the stuff that we read in the chapter. So I will kind of like walk us through the content. If there's activities, we try the activities that are in chapter. And then at the end of each chapter, there's what we call practice tasks, which are what I will assign to you from the book as an assignment. The practice tasks assume that you've read the chapter. So they're going to say, go here and do that. And then if you hadn't read the book, you're like, well, I didn't realize I had to right click, stand on my head, do a backflip, and then open the file. But if you read the book, you would know that you would have to complete those steps. So, and that's where we're at right now. All right, so now that we're going to kick in here after a short break and start working on this first set of tasks. However, we want to kind of all be working in the same environment so that we're all on the same page. I want you to look really carefully at this first little important blurb. And they're putting in a URL. And notice the URL is even underlined. You can try clicking on it, but it's not going to take you anywhere. What they decided to do in their SharePoint examples for this book is to come up with kind of like a fictitious company, and notice that they provide a URL. But they're assuming here that you're working directly on the machine where the SharePoint implementation is present, or a machine that's configured to automatically connect to it. So notice the HTTP address does not have like .com or anything like that. So what we need to do to simulate that is to log into our VM. So you guys have your VM logins. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my remote desktop, and I'm going to connect to, nope, not that version. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to connect to this IP address here. All right. I'm not going to log in as administrator myself. I'm actually going to log in using a student account. You do want to use your fully qualified machine name in all caps, so SPDEVVM, which stands for SharePoint Development VM, / and then whatever your student number was. I think I was using student 5 last time. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Say that again? Yeah, I think it was 5. You know, worst case scenario, I'll be wrong. But you know what? All the accounts have the same password, so I'll be fine. If I find that I don't have permissions for things, I'm telling you in advance, we can correct that. So, all right, so here we go. I'm going to put in my password, which you guys all know, and I'll have the same password as me. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's asking me to worry about the certificate, but I'm not, so I'm going to just say go ahead and connect, and logging into the VM. And you see when the server is running right how nice and snappy it is. It actually is a pretty cool environment that way. Server manager is up, logged into the environment. First thing I'm going to do is close the server manager, just get it out of my way. No need for it. I do have Google Chrome installed on these VMs, and isn't this curious? Let me just throw a piece of information out to you. This Windows Server 2016 looks like Windows 10, right? It has the same user interface. And notice that you have a browser down here, but notice it is not Edge, which is the default browser for Windows 10. It actually is Internet Explorer. And oh my God, please don't run that. Okay, not that I hate Microsoft, but when you run Internet Explorer on Windows Server and you haven't done it before, it is so locked down. You usually have to go through like 20 or 30 screens of like, okay, accept the site, yeah, it's safe, it's okay, that kind of thing, before you can even get to doing anything. So the first thing I do on these is as soon as I can get past all that, is I go ahead and install Chrome. I believe, and don't quote me on this, please, that you can download Edge for Windows Server. Okay. The thinking is, though, who really needs to be surfing on the server? You're surfing, you know what? Go to your own machine and surf. This is a server. So you see the mentality? However, as admins, sometimes you do need to go out to the web and download stuff to do, install things or do maintenance or look things up for why they're not working. So I have Chrome in here. You guys might want to even entertain, if you want, on your VM, you want to like install Firefox or you want to try to install Edge. I would encourage you to go ahead and give that a try. Not a big deal. All right, but I'm going to bring up Chrome, and we want to go ahead and connect to our local SharePoint implementation, which for us is going to be http:// and sp-dev, which stands for SharePoint Dev. That address is only valid when you're remote desktoped into this machine. From a public-facing URL, not through the remote desktop, you will just use the IP address of the machine to connect. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter here, and then I should be prompted for a login screen. Now, food for thought. Even though I logged into my VM using Student 5, it doesn't mean I have to log in with Student 5 to SharePoint. Isn't that wonderful? So what I am going to do, I'm still going to log in with Student 5. Hey, why not? But it just shows you that one's the operating system and one's the SharePoint environment. Notice here I'm not using the fully qualified machine name prior to the student or the username, just so you know. Then go ahead and click sign in. It's going to take a moment. Initial connections to SharePoint sometimes are a little hesitant. This actually came up pretty darn quick. And hopefully you guys are in there. Now, these VMs have pre-existed this semester, and other students have logged in and created accounts and generated content and done interactivity of all sorts. So you might not have a completely clean configuration available. You know what? That's okay, because that's how a real SharePoint environment is. If we're always starting from ground zero, what are you really learning? No, you're logging into a system that's already been used by people. It's not a significant number of people, but there is that piece. So now in the interim, I'm kind of stuck in a little bit of a conundrum here. And the one conundrum is, here I am working inside of a VM, and then out in my host OS is my PDF, right? So one thing that you might want to do is if you're working inside the VM connecting to SharePoint, is actually open up the PDF inside of SharePoint, right? And just have it right there. I happen to have the luxury of a second screen, so it doesn't really matter too much. So I'm going to take advantage of that. But I know that last semester I struggled a little bit with working with the PDFs in there because I kind of like have a strong distaste for doing PDFs through browsers. Because one main reason is as I go through like textbook PDFs like this and I find a mistake or something I want to make note of, I can highlight it if I use Adobe Acrobat, whereas I can't highlight it inside of a browser-based PDF reader. All right, so I'm going to go back full screen here. And so in the book, well, right now, I guess I can't operate with page numbers. That's kind of curious. But in the book, this is where I'm at. So this is like the first set of like step-by-steps inside of Chapter 1. Can't give you a page number because this is an ebook version, so they just don't have page numbers. All right. Now, you will get a security screen, which we've already cleared, but I want to show you that in earlier implementations of SharePoint, sometimes the login screens are a little bit different. And that is not a mistake. Things change from version to version. But you could be asked to log in with an interface that looks more like a standard Windows interface or one that is more of a browser-based interface. It really depends on how your configuration is set up. If you happen to be doing this exercise with Office 365, of course, that's a completely different type of login altogether. So don't let this screen throw you. All right. So they're showing us here, and I'm going to pull this back over again. So if you sign into SharePoint Server directly, you might get an interface like this. Ours actually came up in the browser, right? It was more like a JavaScript pop-up kind of box. And then they're also showing you that if you're logging in online, you might get a box that looks like this. Now, when I logged into SharePoint Online here in my browser just a little while ago, previous video, if you're keeping track, I was just automatically logged in because I have a little box. Just leave me logged in because I'm always using it. So you might not even be prompted, so that's just something you should know. All right. The next thing they want us to do is they want us to go look at the SharePoint help. So they want us to go, it says go to the upper right part of the page and select the help button. Guess which one that is? Maybe the question mark. Now as you click this, tell me what happens. Yeah, it's broken. Welcome to, yours works?
Yeah, I got SharePoint stuff.
Oh yeah. So I'm clicking on help. Unfortunately, help seems to be broken. No, it's not broken. We never installed it. All right. So like you say, why the hell did you do that? Okay. So like if you get to a point and you're doing the exercises and it asks you to do this and take a screenshot, this help is going to be broken because on these local implementations, all the stuff that we adds to the disk size, and I have limited disk space on these like virtual machines. So if you really want to see what the help screen looks like, go to the SharePoint Online. Okay. The other thing you should know is sometimes when you're looking for help about SharePoint, you're better off just going straight up to Google and typing in a question rather than looking through Microsoft's help. I think it's actually a little bit easier, so it's kind of like a dual-edged sword. So no, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just not set up. But interestingly, Jill, you're on a machine that ends in 212 for an IP address?
Yeah, but no, mine's broken.
Oh, okay, it is. I thought that maybe Bill, our overachieving Star Trek fan, student, maybe went to the extra effort of trying to do that. Now notice another thing here. I just got a little message up on the screen here saying low disk space. So that's probably the result of you guys doing some upgrade. Maybe before we leave here tonight, I'll show you how to contend with that. Right. Oh, okay. That's okay. But yeah, okay. So it's okay. I will show you how to contend with that. For right now, we're ignoring it. All right. So we got past the help thing. All right. Now we're going to bring the book back over, and we're going to talk about the next topic here, which is collaborating and sharing within teams. So this is one of the real key features of SharePoint, at least in my mind. So the kind of tools that we have available is the ability to form a bunch of different constructs within the environment. So one would be that we can actually create, they say communities. So like we can actually create things that are called team sites. So websites that are only available to certain users. And then we can also work on documents together. We can create tasks and monitor our progress. There's a blogging engine and a microblogging engine built in. There's also the ability to kind of like create friends and follow what they're doing and like things and put comments out there and create wikis and so much more. Right? But those are a lot of the key ones. One thing that's kind of interesting is when you do collaborate with documents, and this is kind of a fun thing to do really, is you can put documents into the SharePoint environment for storage. And then once they're stored there, people can check them out and make edits and then put them back. And the checkout process sometimes triggers your local install of Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, whatever it is. So you edit the file, and it's in checked out status, and then when you post it back, it will store within the environment. The neat thing, it'll update and store. Now, we did discover in the summer semester that one of our VMs was failing in restoring the document, and we'll see if we can fix that this semester. Hopefully you're not on that machine, you guys. Actually, I think it might have been on the old server, but it's a separate story. The other thing that you can do is you can actually create a thing called subsites. So SharePoint basically operates on this like weird like hierarchy of a structure. So what the core kind of like website structure is called the site collection. So there has to be a master site collection for the whole implementation. From there, you then start to create team sites, and then from those team sites, you can create subsites. And all of them exist kind of in their own separate space that have different permissions. So you don't have to let people see it, or you can give permission to people to see it. And another thing that we've discovered moving from SharePoint 2013 to 2016 is in SharePoint 2013 and earlier, it was encouraged that the SharePoint web content was available to the public. So you could hit, like on our sharepoint.gtc.edu machine, you can type in that address and get to the front end, even if you don't have an account, because it's set up to do that. On the more modern versions, they've kind of rethought that and really have kind of excluded the public from being able to just willy-nilly jump into SharePoint. They really want it to be a controlled environment. And really it's kind of logical, but what happens then is you kind of exclude SharePoint as being a content management system for a public-facing website. But that shows a real change in methodology, so it's not by mistake, it is by design from Microsoft. Another thing that you have built into SharePoint is the ability to share files, and you can do it from within SharePoint sites. They actually have document handling systems, but notice that they have another tool here which you might already recognize and use, and that is OneDrive. However, it's OneDrive for Business, right? And what that means is you can take your SharePoint implementation and use it as a cloud storage service. And if you are running it on premise, it's kind of like having your own private cloud. If you're running in the cloud, it really is more cloud-based, but it is privatized, live syncing storage. And all the SharePoint accounts, even on our VMs, do it. And you can configure your machine to automatically talk to it. That's something I think it's kind of cool. So we'll be playing with that as well. Okay, some more cool tools that they have are the abilities to basically form libraries for your documents. You can see that there's a calendaring system built in, the ability to set up like to-do lists. There's certain like business intelligence tools that are included. The fact that you can kind of create I'm not going to say like a social network per se, like a la Facebook, but there are social networking components to this. And they tie into all the Office products, so you can do some pretty sophisticated things that way. And if you work within an organization where everybody in the organization is using it, you can really kind of leverage some of those tools and do some pretty powerful and sophisticated things. You know, run online meetings with document sharing and calendar tie-ins. It's really a pretty cool kind of thing. All right, we're moving on now to this little section of practice stuff to do. And they want us to actually open the documents library. And notice what they're asking us to do. Go to a SharePoint site where you want to open the documents library. They're not really giving us much of a clue here, are they? So if you might happen to have a document library available, great. If not, how is this going to work for you, right? So on the left-hand side of the screen, select Documents if that is an option for you. So notice, for me, that is not an option, correct? All right, so that is not necessarily a bad thing. So we can't do this task. But when we do get into an implementation that has documents pre-existing in it, you will be able to do that. You know, and the truth be told, actually, one of these links here might actually be a documents library. So I'm just kind of clicking on it, and you know, so here's my recollection. So I clicked on furniture in mine, and guess what it is? It's a document library. So what does it look like? It looks like folders and files of documents. All right. That was a really challenging exercise, I know. That was a joke. Let me get my PDF back up here. Next thing that we will check out is to post to a site newsfeed. So in order to be able to post to a site newsfeed, first you got to be able to get to a site, right? So I'm going to go back to like the root page here, and do you notice how there's a newsfeed thing? That's kind of one of the default things on most sites. And if you come in here and you just say, hey, like, wow, this is kind of cool, or something like that, and then just click post, you'll see that it appears in the newsfeed. Pretty silly, but actually it can be a kind of a useful feature. That's a very, very, very quick example of the tool. And all the things that we're kind of previewing quickly here, we will look at more in depth as we go through the book, just so you know. All right, next topic we have here is the fact that we have the ability within SharePoint to configure the permissions of how people can access certain components or features within SharePoint. So you see there's like certain basic permission levels that are attributed to it. So from the most basic to the most advanced, obviously the most advanced being full control, that would be the equivalent of making somebody an admin over whatever thing you're giving them full control over. That does not mean you have full control over SharePoint. That just means you have full control over what you were given full control over. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So in some cases, you might be given the opportunity to be able to just read the content or basically not even see it. Or in some cases to be able either to change the content and do other design features. All of them have different aspects. For the most part, the settings that we're going to make for ourselves will usually be full control so that people can make edits to things. In some cases, you might create something inside this environment and you'll give the other users only partial control. So maybe they can do edits, or maybe they can do contribute and add a couple things, but they can't really, like change the look of your page, for example. So permission levels apply to many things. And one thing you might run into initially as we're working is, let's say, Jill creates a site, and then I try to connect to it, but she never gave me permission to even look. Right? And I can't even see it, So at the very least, you'd probably want to go in there and set read permissions for me so I can see what we're looking at. Kind of a common sense thing, I suppose. All right. Now, we won't really have this capability at this point, although you can try to play with it. So the first thing that they're asking us to do here is go to the SharePoint site you want to share, assuming you're even the owner of it to begin with, right? And then go ahead and click the share icon. I'm going to try to do this where I'm at right now and see what happens. All right. So here I am. I'm on the root site for the VM, and I'm going to click the share button, and I do get the interface that they're showing in the book in step 3. So then I want to, like, let's say, allow somebody, maybe student 10 or 11 or something like that, access. So I really don't even remember what the student's name was, so I just start typing and notice how it kind of narrows it down automatically. And what you'll find is that all the student accounts will be listed here. And Cornica, which account number are you? 8? I'm going to go ahead and give you permission, and I thought I clicked on 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and click share. All right. So now you should be able to see this site at the very least. Now, you notice when I click the share, I really didn't set any permissions, but we will get to the point where we set those permission levels, and notice all the different options that are available. Apparently this one was already preset. And if you're questioning, which things are already shared, you can come to the shared with tab off here to the side and see who it's already shared with. So if you find that one of the other student accounts for whatever reason can't access the resources, this will kind of show you that, and then you go back here and you can actually invite people. When you do an invite to somebody, it's kind of strange because you can actually configure this to actually send an email or send a message within SharePoint to do that. But a lot of times what we do when we use these sharing tools is we just kind of brute force allow people to use something and not worry about inviting them. We just do it. All right, let's move on to the next section here, and it says use SharePoint integration with Office. So one of the things that we have, because Microsoft has made this move to kind of combine these tools, is kind of trying to follow in the footsteps of Google and their approach with like Google Docs being kind of bundled with their email and all their other tools. Microsoft kind of wants to do the same thing. So SharePoint and Office really are pretty tightly integrated in many ways. What we've done on these VMs, and you can thank the people from the previous semester for this, is we went ahead and we installed Microsoft Office into the environment. So Word and Excel and all those tools are available in your VM as full installed products, and partially to allow for that integration. When you're working with the online versions, of course, you're working with the cloud versions of the basic software, but even those versions can tie into your locally installed version of Word, or Excel, or PowerPoint, or whatever tool you choose. Another real important feature that I would call a higher level feature, and I had the impression that they were going to deprecate this at some point, but that's not the case, is SharePoint includes a pretty rich set of tools for doing business intelligence. So this is something that might appeal to some of you, especially if you work with a lot of data and do a lot of analysis. This might be one of those tools that might be useful for you. Another thing that's kind of important for this integration is the way that Office is integrated into your organization. The problem here is every organization sets it up differently. Gateway runs a pretty high level implementation, but if you worked at a smaller company, they might not want to pay that extra money to Microsoft, so they might go with something simpler, so something you might not necessarily know. If you are using some sort of like a private company's implementation of SharePoint, not a bad idea to try to familiarize yourself with whoever the admin of the system is and pick their brain a little bit and see how it's set up. Just ask, and I would bet if you talk to them that it might enlighten you on a few things, probably not the least of which is the fact that, a lot of people in organizations don't even bother to touch it. So I think that's kind of fascinating. Now they are indicating here that the 2016 version of Office is the best one to work with if you are working with SharePoint 2016. They want you to kind of marry those two versions. The version of Office that we have installed in our VMs is Office 2013, and I want you to be aware of that. That was chosen for a couple of reasons. One reason is that's the one I had available. Because, when we start to install on gateway systems here, I have to be careful about what license copies I have and how those licenses are activated. We have custom versions that we install that are auto authenticated by virtue of being installed somewhere on our network. The other reason is because Office 2013 includes in the professional versions a product called SharePoint Designer 2013, which we will be tinkering with when we move probably into the second course. And that product was last offered in 2013. And I don't believe it's offered in 2016. And if it is, it's probably still the 2013 version. I understand that they're probably not going to bring that product back. And I know we've talked about it before, but SharePoint Designer is kind of the modern version of Microsoft Front Page. And there's a few things in that tool that you can do with SharePoint Designer that you cannot do with any other product that allows you certain feature control over SharePoint from an external mechanism. So that's one of the whys for that. All right. Okay, next thing we're going to take a look at here is this activity. And notice we are going to go back to a documents library. So if you guys are able to actually find a documents library, great. If not, work with whatever you have. I know that if you're on the same machine as me, you have that furniture document library there. And then what they want us to do in the document is to actually utilize this to create something new. So what we're going to do is first go into the library as we did, and you got a couple of options here. He says do one of the following. Select the Files tab at the top of the page. So notice when you click on the Files tab, it displays what we call the ribbon bar. That's what Microsoft calls it. And I'll tell you, when I first saw this in the Microsoft product, I gasped and said, oh my God, this is horrible, right? Now I can't imagine living without it. Isn't that weird? Because I was so into the old school menu driven approach. Then I'm like, what are they doing, But really it's pretty smart. And then that they have that also, and it looks the same inside of this environment. I think it makes you feel comfortable working with the tools in my mind. All right, so if you click on the Files tab, then you'll notice that you have the ability to create a new document. So go ahead, if you have this as an option, click New. And depending, and I'm waiting for people to kind of chime in here, which machine you're on and how it was configured, you might get different things. So for me, it's popping up this box, and it says Open Office Desktop. So it's actually taking me out to Word. But notice what it's saying. Some files, viruses. But yeah, okay. Do you want to open this file? Yes, I want to open Microsoft Word. Thank you very much. I'm sure it's not a virus. Oh, no, wait, it is. Not kidding. Too late. So here's Word coming up. And now they're just trying to also connect me back to the machine. I'm going to actually use my student account here. You may or may not get this dialog, but if you do, log in with the same student account that you use, because remember, you're on the VM, and what this is actually doing is giving you access rights that when you do something here and save the file, so it can write back to the system, right? If you don't authenticate, you're not going to be able to. So I'm going to click OK. And of course, it's not letting me do it. All right, so apparently I had a lost file or something in there, but here I am. Okay, yes, I'm going to use recommended settings. Thank you very much. We just want to get to work. Okay, so now we're in this Microsoft update loop. Apparently this student account has not used Office yet, so you guys might get the same thing. Just follow through, so go ahead and say yes. Yeah, see, you're getting the same thing on your screen that I am, Cornica, right? All right. Not much we can really do about it. We kind of have to play nice here. Okay, no background, thank you. Good to go, all done. Great. All right. So now, I don't know, if you are working with the online version, um, the book indicates that you just have to click this button within the environment, so you can try that. We're working with an on-premise version right now. All right, so whether it opens up in your browser or the separate piece of software, just, just type something into Word so we have something to work with for the example. And I don't care about your grammar or whatever, just type something in there. Now notice what we want to do at this point is twofold. If you're working in the browser-based online version, they want you to jump out of the browser and go back to the documents library in the browser, and then you'll see in the online version, whatever you did is automatically saved back in. In the on-premise version, we have to actually save the document and then save it back to the documents library of our SharePoint site. Now, the problem is, where the heck is that? I don't see that listed. So if you have added a place, you guys seen what I just did? I clicked on add a place, and it says Office 365 SharePoint. Is that what I want to do? No. What about OneDrive? No. What's really the situation here is that I don't have it set up. So we won't actually be able to get it back to the library. All right. So we're kind of poking around here with all the different options and discovering that our SharePoint implementation isn't in here. The one thing that you can do is when we get this configured later on is it will do that edit right directly back, but it takes a few steps. So this is just a kind of a trial run, so it is what it is. We're basically not going to be able to complete this little thing. So here in class, the interesting thing is I have a different person, Cornica, who is working on the same server as me, and she's doing the same steps. But when she hit the save, and let me ask you, did you just do save or save as? You just hit the icon? All right. And on her listing here, she came up with a separate option, which was other web locations, and that included a link back to the document library. So I'm just wondering if maybe I repeated my steps. So if I get out of here, don't save it, go back and do new document, and then when you logged in, okay, so you did this login normal, right? And see, I'm getting this, and I'm not sure why that is. Because I'm guessing you didn't get that message, right? Because that could be one of the problems I'm having. Okay, let me just try something really quick. All right, and of course with SharePoint, it's always these kind of weird little things that happen, and it takes me a while sometimes to catch on to what the problem is. But I'm thinking that this isn't shared with me, right? So I might not have the ability to write back properly. So what I would ask you to do is if you could click here and see, I am not included on the share list. let me see if I can share it with myself even though I'm not shared. Do you see like the conundrum here? So I'm student 5. Let's show the options. Um, I'm going to give myself full control. Why not, if I can? And now let me try that whole procedure one more time. All right. So now maybe it'll actually work. And Jill, you didn't use the ribbon bar approach. You just use new.
No. Yeah, just using it.
Right. So then you get this interface. Right.
No, I didn't get it.
No,
It just opened.
it did.
Yeah, I did new document there. And then, yeah, that's what I got.
Okay. All right. So I'm still getting this weird thing about this particular file. And I'm concerned that this is the thing that's causing me the problem. So maybe if I log into a different student account and try this, it'll work just fine. And maybe after like 20 tries, I'll actually do that. But I still don't get why that's doing it, but okay. Type some stuff in. Go ahead and hit save. I still don't have that other web location thing here.
Yeah, I didn't get the other web location either. But, open here, document, why did you have to?
All right, so at this point, I'm really going to kind of chalk this up to it's not really possible at this point in time with the configuration I have. And my feeling is that if I went ahead and signed out of the browser with this student account and, very importantly, close the browser altogether, and I'm going to actually try going in with one of the accounts I think might work. So I'm going to log back into that machine. This time I'm going to use student 10. And gosh, I should know the password by now. All right, and then I'll go to the furniture, library, files, new, open in Office. Still getting that weird file mistake, but hey, I'm going to try it still. All right, so here I have document, type some stuff. Go ahead and click save. And I still have this kind of like limited option approach here. So I'm going to chalk it up to there's something going on that, aha, well, wait, you guys seeing a difference here? Right here, student 5. I think it's like a fictional person. All right, yeah. See, I'm walking down a path here. I don't want to walk right now because this is the introductory chapter. This is the kind of stuff we do later in the course, and yeah, later. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the documents. Let's just call that one a wash for now. For some of you, it might work. For some, not. If you really want to kind of see it in action and have it work better, do it with the Office 365 version because that is tightly integrated and the storage is right there along with it. All right. The next part of this chapter is kind of like the dry info part that most of you probably don't care about, but SharePoint's been around for a while and it has a bunch of different versions. The book, of course, is centered around SharePoint 2016, and then the cloud version, which is the 365 version. But there are these previous implementations. So you got 2013, 2010, 2007, 2003, and a few other tools that you see listed here. And all of these different versions actually have various types of versions on top of it all. Now, why we're on 2016, they kind of go through here. and explain it's more cloud-based, it's more modern, works across all types of devices. It works better in social capacities, and it shows you all the different things that are included. We did talk a little bit about the client access licenses of the different versions, and that there's some importance there, I suppose. But really, you can see the push here with the modern version is the push to the cloud and Office 365. You know, the one thing I suppose I could demonstrate, you know, now that I think of it, is maybe I could just jump into my cloud version really quick and try that document thing. So if I go to SharePoint, and see, the problem I have here is I don't necessarily have a document library. All right, so that kind of shoots that right away too. All right, never mind. I don't want to walk that path. Strike that, and I'm sorry I recorded it. If I'm really ambitious, I'll edit it out of the video, but I don't think so. I don't feel quite that ambitious. But the problem with all of this, and it's not necessarily a problem, is the ability to have so many different versions that do different things, and some will let you do some things and some won't. And for most normal users, it's kind of a maddening prospect. But the reality is they make many different versions and flavors to accommodate many different types of implementations. If you are working with Office Online, you can actually flip a little switch and actually take you back to the old-fashioned version. So what they're telling you here is that you can actually switch to the classic experience, which turns your browser into that old-fashioned view. That is basically the content of the chapter. And what they show you here is a brief synopsis of what you learned real quickly. And then we get to the end part of the chapter where you have your practice tasks. And here come your first official assignments. So I'm going to stop this video here. I'm not going to record this part of it now because what I would like you guys to do is under your own time and free will and the various SharePoint implementations, experiment. And I would encourage you to try these activities in each one of the 3 different environments. I know from experience from the previous iterations where people had successes and failures, and I'd just like to see if you guys have the same issues. So what I guess I'm forewarning you about is don't expect everything to work perfectly. Figure out where it works and where it doesn't work. Take screenshots as you go, that's pretty standard, and then give me some verbose feedback about what happened. It doesn't have to be, pages and pages, going on and on. Just, hey, I tried it here and it worked great. I had this problem, I couldn't make it go on, just give me some sort of detail. Something to show me that you completed each task. So they're going to have you kind of reiterate all the different things that we just did in the chapter, except you're doing it on your own. Some of the tasks are pretty simplistic, but you should be able to complete all of them. So there's not a lot to do there. So go ahead and proceed with that, and then next week we'll come back and compare notes on it. Folks, this video ends here.